Hi there. In this tutorial I am going to build a fist. The intended target audience for this exercise is beginners. I'm going to be starting by blocking in some of the bigger forms and then adding more detail as it as it's time. So I just kind of want to basically walk through the entire process of what this looks like. So I've got some reference here that I took of my own fist using a cell phone and a mirror. So I will go ahead and just drop it in. Now if I was working on my own I would just use my other monitor, but so that you guys can see what I'm looking at here, I'm going to drop a plane onto the canvas and then append a Z-sphere. Go to edit mode. And because this is kind of a sideways orientation, I think I'll just follow that. So it's kind of arbitrary which way I decide to go. But I do sort of want to be looking at it so that when I snap the camera, I'm going to be either looking at the front or the side. It's a little bit tricky in draw mode because when you hold shift to snap the camera, it'll do something weird. So what I'm going to do instead is just go ahead and turn symmetry on. So now I can kind of get an idea of exactly which way sideways is, and I'm fine with that. So now I can turn my symmetry off. I don't actually need this one, and I'll just draw one more over here. Like that. And it doesn't have to be any better than that. Like we don't have symmetry on the model, so it doesn't matter that we have symmetry with the Z-spheres. So this little peanut here is pretty much all we need, and if I hold the shift key and drag out here, the camera will snap, and I can see it's not quite perfect. So I think what I'll do is, before I convert this into a polymesh 3D, I will just kind of adjust it a little bit. So when I hold shift and snap the camera, I'm kind of looking at the, what will be the top, front, and side. So that looks fine. I will go ahead and hit Make Polymesh 3D. So for those of you who, maybe this is the first time you're seeing this tutorial, I use a custom UI. The custom UI should be available wherever you see this tutorial. It may not be, but basically I've just exposed some of the brushes that I use frequently, so that people that are learning don't have to try to navigate this massive crazy menu here. So here we've got PM3D Z-Sphere 1, which means I've converted it to a Polymesh 3D by hitting the Make Polymesh 3D button. If I wanted to, I could go back to my Z-Sphere and convert it back to a Z-Sphere by hitting the A key. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to decide that this is going to be my side view, so I will be working from this image, and I'm just going to use the move brush, and without doing any subdivision yet, I'm just going to start kind of blocking in, trying to find that outline there. And obviously with such a low poly count, I'm not going to be able to get any real detail. That's totally fine. Okay, so now we can rotate over. So now that I should have rotated this. I'm going to pause the video and flip this so that it matches better with what's going on here. Okay, so I just took this into Photoshop and flipped it so that now as I move around my model, it's going to match up with what's going on here with my reference. So I don't have to do any gymnastics in my head. So same deal here. I'm just going to kind of try to make it approximately line up with that general shape. Just dealing with the big forms here. Okay, now I'll come over here. I don't know that I'm going to be able to get much more detail than I've currently got without doing some subdividing, and I'm going to try to hold off on that until I have a chance to kind of go through and look at all this stuff. So the thumb here is over there, so this is the top view. So I'll go ahead and line the camera up there. So it looks like probably could kind of come out a little bit further there, and so at this point all I've used is the move brush, and I'm getting a little bit more of a prominent thumb than I've got in my mesh so far. And to do the to get the hotkey for draw size here is the S. So I'm just tapping S, and the little slider will show up directly underneath wherever your brush is. So that thumb probably isn't going to be quite that high. So I'll just use the shift key very, very lightly to kind of bring that back down. So I want to get that prominence here, but make sure that it's happening below kind of where it's supposed to. Alright, so I think that's about as close as I'm going to get with this low of a subdivision. So I'll just go ahead and give it one more subdivision by hitting Control D. You can also go to Geometry and hit the divide button. So we'll just start back over where we were. So there's that. So now let's see, I can get maybe a little bit more stuff happening as far as the detail. So a little bit more prominent in the knuckle. And I think I've got to move the thumb back a bit and we'll pull it out. So I'm just looking at this image here, doing a comparison. Now you can, if you want, drop this to your desktop and then use the see-through feature. And I may do something similar like that eventually, but my desktop's actually kind of a chaotic mess, so I'm going to spare you guys that experience if I can. Okay, so pretty happy with what's going on there. I'm going to come over here, and we can see how prominent that knuckle is right there. And here. So getting to the point where I might need to introduce some additional brushes. But I want to make sure I get as much out of this very introductory part as I can. So that's, start to see that thumb in there, that's pretty cool. Maybe a little bit bigger there. Bigger on, so now I'm looking at this image. We can bring this section down a little bit. So I don't have perspective turned on. The hotkey for that is P, or you can hit this persp up here. And because all of these photos have perspective in them, even though it's going to be a little bit of a different focal length, just depending on how far away I was from the camera, it's still probably a good idea to turn perspective on, just to make sure that we are kind of doing apples to apples here. With a smaller object like this, perspective isn't going to make a huge amount of difference probably, but there will be some changes. So that's as far as I can go here. I'm going to give it one more subdivision, Control D. You can see that goes up to 3 here. And now I'm going to use damn standard, but the default setting, well, I think mine's a little bit lower than the default. It's normally something a little bit higher, I think, in the mid-40s. So, but this is even too high at 30. I'm going to drop this down to about 15. And make sure I turn my lazy mouse setting so that my lazy radius is a little bit higher. Now, if I just use the regular lazy radius of 1, I'm not really going to get any smoothing effect to my stroke. But if I increase this, what I'll get is this stroke will be the average of all of the pixels in that red line there, and the length of that red line is controlled by the lazy radius. So the longer, the higher this value is, the longer this line is, and that's not always great for tight curves, but you can get some nice smooth lines. So anyway, I'm going to probably just keep this in the 20 to 30 range. And we'll go back to our little view here. So start kind of finding where the thumb and the index finger meet. And that's a pretty big little dip there. And oftentimes the negative space can be just as valuable as what you see in the positive space. So just switched over to the move brush. I'm going to try to pull that out, and obviously the knuckle, that first knuckle there and the index finger is going to be kind of popping out a little bit. Okay, so now I'll come down and look at this. And I still feel like it's maybe needs to be scooted over that way a bit. So really looking right down the front of the index finger there. Okay, so back to damp standard. And I think this thumb kind of needs to go about like that. And I can double check over here. Gotta make sure the lines are correct. So I've got a little bit of a bend there. And there. So very, very rough, very crude, no detail. Not much detail anyway. And let's see, we can come over and look at the other side. Kind of get an idea. So I've got this big line here that's currently missing. And the fingers are kind of happening there. So this palm space, that's all going to be pushed in, so that should be negative. And again, I'm just using damn standard. Alright, so let's go ahead and actually, no, before I go to the next subdivision, and there's absolutely no reason that I can't eventually come back to this subdivision, or not eventually, but definitely, and not much time at all. But it's so I'm just kind of looking at how flat that is. That line right there, I really want to make sure that if I come back over to match the reference, that's like almost a straight line, so I need to make sure that I'm not investing too much in the wrong shape here. And I can see this line here, this whole kind of row of little fingers back there needs to kind of tuck up a little bit. Okay, so let's do one more subdivision here. So now we're kind of getting to the point where we can actually begin to get some detail out of this. So we'll start back over here, use dam standard, and begin kind of finding where some of the stuff comes together. And I've got a little bit of a prominence there at the knuckle, and then it kind of dips in. So again, I'm just holding shift to snap the camera, and I'll bring that knuckle out a bit. And there's a little bit of volume right in there, so I want to try to get that. And some extra mass down there, and I don't think the thumb is quite thick enough. And this little crevice here is definitely not deep enough, but I think I only just now have enough geometry to support that. So, kind of look at the wrist here. The wrist is every bit as important as the rest of it. So I'm kind of looking at this angle, and I want to bring that wrist in, so I'll use the move brush here. Come and look at the top view. And there's a couple of good tricks for cleaning that edge up right here. We'll get to that towards the end. So I'm looking at this little line there, and I think it's not too far off, but there's it sort of goes out and then comes back down, and mine does not really come back down, so bring this in a little bit. Very prominent knuckle. And you can see how sharp this little angle is right here. So I'm going to kind of pull that out. Sometimes it can be difficult if the geometry is sort of on the far side of the model to get it. But whoops, I meant to grab the clay tube. So now we're going to add a little volume using clay tubes. So let's see if I can find my view here. I'm kind of looking at that mass. So I'll need to kind of push that down using the Alt. And the clay tubes, the intensity is 49, and that's definitely too high. So 15 is generally about where I like to keep my sculpting brushes. There are some brushes like Move and Smooth and Flatten when we get to it that are probably a little bit better at higher values. So let's see. Let's take a look at this little dent here and try to kind of work that in a little better using the dam standard. So I've got to kind of carve and then go back to the reference. So just using Move here. Add a little bit of volume there. I'm going to come over with clay tubes and just kind of carve the inside of the wrist in a bit, so that as I look at it from this view, I start to get that deeper. I've got a skinny little wrist, so I want to make sure that I capture that. Okay, so let's come and look at the front here. Now one of the things that I've got, I don't have a 3/4 view, so I don't really understand exactly what's happening here, so I've got to kind of intuit based on the front view here. So I'm just going to go ahead and kind of fill that in, and I know I've got my, and that's a smooth there, I'm just holding the shift key, so I've got these fingers that are definitely going to be there, and I feel like probably I don't quite have enough space towards the outside for the pinky. And I think the thumb might be a little bit too high. So I'm just kind of looking at this stuff here. And in this section, what I want is to kind of pull that thumb area out. And this is going to be one of the areas that's probably going to give you the most trouble, is adding that volume without kind of messing up the rest of the fingers. So what I prefer to do is kind of get the outside sorted and then work in, so that way you don't try to, like, if you get all the fingers figured out and then you start working with the thumb, you're going to kind of mess this stuff up. So at least that's my preferred methodology. So we'll just kind of come in, and it looks like that thumb is going to sort of come right down the middle of the middle finger there. So as I begin to map out where that middle finger is going to go, I want to make sure that it kind of lines up with sort of where the middle of the thumb is, and if I need to kind of scoot some things around, it'll all go together. So back to dam standard here, and kind of see where the pinky starts. It's kind of right in the middle of that form, not up here. And then over here, can kind of see what the, let me make sure I match that view. So got that shape there. And this is actually the middle knuckle, and the last knuckle is going to be folded in. So I want to make sure that I preserve some space there so that I can have that depth right there. Very, very important. In fact, I'm going to come over and look at it from this side. And we can see some issues here going on with the pinky. It's a little bit thicker than it should be. So clay tubes here. I'm going to just sort of add some volume in, but I want to make sure that I don't go too far because that pinky is pretty far well tucked in there. So I want to make sure I leave enough space out here. A little more volume in there because when I look through I can see that ring finger poking through. Maybe not that much, but totally fine. It's kind of better to have something there that's wrong that you can fix than to have nothing at all. And you can see I've got just, it's very rough at this point. I'm not trying to get any specific details, and I would encourage you at this early phase to you know, not dig into anything like, you know, fingernails or wrinkles or knuckles or any that kind of stuff, like knuckle wrinkle type stuff. It's still very, very early, and we will get there. So now what I'm seeing is here I've got the butt of my palm kind of goes all the way back there. So if I was to kind of cut this in half, I'd say the length of the fingers is about halfway of the length of this volume here. So that means it's going to be back here somewhere. So I'll just come over here with my clay tubes and kind of fill it in. So when I do that, I ought to flip up here and double check I didn't just seriously veer off the concept, because I did just kind of add some volume. So I tried to keep the, you know, the length of the general size of the hands about the same in all the reference, so that I don't have to worry about translating, well, this one's bigger than this one. But it looks like there may be a bit of a disagreement there, but maybe not. Okay, so now I think it's time to begin organizing this a little bit better. Right now it's kind of chaotic in terms of what the surface is doing. So I'm going to add one more subdivision. So now we're at 5, and we're about almost 20 minutes in, so you can see how long it took me to get here. And I'm going to grab this flattened 4R4. Now, if you are not one of my students, you probably don't have this laying around, but I will make it available to you. So wherever you see this tutorial, if it's on Vimeo, there should be a link somewhere that will take you to a place where you can grab this. This is just the Zbrush flattened brush from 4R4. They changed it in 4R5, and I do not like the new one. If you're used to it, feel free to just use the one that you're used to, but I much prefer the 4R4 brush. So I'm going to go ahead and grab it. And the way I like it is with the square alpha and a little bit of a negative focal shift. So what this is going to let me do is basically come in and begin to find the big planar shapes that are going to make up the big detail of this sculpt. So I'm just going to come in and kind of pave this chaotic stuff down. Now I don't want to use the smooth brush, because the smooth brush is going to eliminate a lot of my detail. I much prefer using the flattened brush. So the wrist is a little bit more reasonable. Let's come over and maybe look at the thumb a bit. So here's our reference. I've got this kind of lit area there, so I will just kind of begin to carve that, and I can see here what a nice clean flat plane that top area is, so I'll just kind of hit that. And the thumb's going to scoop in, and currently it scoops in a little bit. Could probably be a little bit wider though, so let's see if I can find a shot. So there's how thick it is. Unfortunately, I don't have a straight down shot of the thumb, which would have been kind of nice to get. As you are doing this, you're certainly welcome to use my reference, but if you're making your own, you may want to spend a little bit of time getting a couple more, like a 3/4 shot would have been nice. But you go to war with the reference you have, as they say. So I'm going to add this probably a little bit early, but I'm just going to start kind of blocking in some of the wrinkly stuff over here. And I'm using damn standard with the Alt button, which pulls up rather than pushing down. And the intensity is pretty low, Z intensity of 15, and the lazy radius is on at 37. So I can get some pretty nice graceful lines here. And I've got this big cut right there as the index finger folds. That's going to need to be in there, so I'll just go ahead and add that. So I'm beginning to feel like I might have developed this view a little bit more than the rest of the hand, so I'm going to go and look at some other stuff now, specifically this side. So let's hit that flattened 404 again. And we can just kind of maybe clean this up a little bit more. I see like a little dent right there. So with the flattened brush, you're not really going to push any volume in, but you can sort of get some landmarks. So I see this really prominent middle knuckle, and I want to come back to that. I feel like I might have underdone it. So let's make sure we go to the right view here, and I can actually see it looks much wider. My fist looks much wider than what I've got. So that is not a problem. All I need to do is just drop down a few subdivisions, go to my move brush, and I'm just going to kind of make everything a little bit wider. And I think that's cool. You know, reserving the right to come back and take a look at that again. So now I'm going to come in and maybe think about these lines a little bit. So that this index finger actually appears to be thicker than the rest of them. Well, actually the pinky is pretty thick too. So these two are going to be a little bit narrower. So just want to make sure that that is reflected in kind of where I start mapping out these lines. And the other thing I notice is the pinky is significantly shorter here. So let's go ahead and use the clay tubes with negative, just to kind of knock him back a bit. And I see a little bit of a dent there, and a little, you know, the flesh is kind of folding out on that side. So I'll add some volume there and take some away from there. And this is just using the clay tubes. So having done that, now I kind of immediately want to come back with my flattened brush and just settle that stuff into kind of a more readable state. Alright, so let's take a look at this. Kind of the line there from the top of the knuckle down to the bottom is pretty straight, and mine actually looks like it might be kind of tilting over a little bit. So at this point, you've pretty much seen my workflow. It's just gradually refining the form slowly and trying to be as attentive to the reference as possible. Probably could do more sculpting at this level, but I'm feeling like it might be time to add another subdivision. So I just kind of want to, like I said, I can always come back. So down here it looks pretty liney right there. So I'm going to go ahead and just put that, kind of block in that line, and begin thinking about maybe this thumb shape here. So I'm going to stick with damn standard. This is almost a vertical line, like right in there. And there's a little bit of a space. So I can go ahead and get that space, and then bring that vertical line in. And I don't really see any of my index finger in there, so I'm actually pretty comfortable with what's going on right now, but I do see a bunch of that middle finger. So in this case, rather than using the move brush, because I've kind of already got some things arranged, I'm just going to use clay tubes and add a little bit of volume there. Okay. So damn standard, and we can kind of give this a little bit of a separation. Those two fingers. Now, so what I just did is I just drew it down on my, like what made sense to my camera, but it actually needed to be a little bit of a different angle. And let's see if I've got my reference. It's a little bit tricky. Maybe that would have been a good shot to get to sort of see how these fingers are oriented, but I'm just going to have to use my judgment on that. So let's see, along the top here, yeah, I've got a little bit of a conflict in the reference as far as, well, maybe not. Let me just move this thumb area back. And so I'm going to just mask this section of the wrist off and invert the mask, and then just kind of run it back to give myself a little bit more breathing room there. Now, if any of this stuff is really, really unfamiliar and you're at a very basic level, I have a series that is available, an introduction to ZBrush series is available at badking.com. So I would suggest that you check that out if you're interested. It'll kind of break down a lot of the stuff that I'm doing here as far as the tool. Whoops, I just held the shift key there. Alright, so I'm going to just drop this down a bit and then kind of move using transpose. Make the wrist a little bit thicker there and then a little bit thicker again out that way. So I'm just kind of looking at this shape here. And the other thing is, when you work off like that, you actually do get some distortion. So it can occasionally, if you're trying to get something really lined up, be better to kind of work in the middle of your screen or just turn perspective off. That's fine too. So looking at it, it sort of feels like out here I've got this, prominent little arm bone here. I'm not sure which one it is. I should know. So I'm going to come in with clay tubes. Actually, that's something that's more of a move operation. That's a pretty big change. And just pull it up. Okay, and then I've got a dent. So this tendon looks like it's coming in probably towards the back. So come in with the flatten and just sort of round that transition out a bit. And that bone should be pretty far out to the side, so I think I might have had it a little bit too centered. So I'm going to use clay tubes. Kind of move it out there. So look in here again. And then back to clay tubes, and I can see a little bit of a dent there, so I'm going to carve that in, and then I've got that outside tendon, and then a bit of a dent in there as well. And that's definitely more bump there than I'm going to want to end up with, but it's okay for the time being. So hit the flatten brush. Just kind of bring these masses into something that's a little more sculpty and a little muddy, although it's still looking pretty muddy. Alright, so looking at this, what I can see is my pinky is not nearly long enough this way. So I'll drop it down a little bit, and yeah, I think that's the right way to go. I'll just bring all these fingers down, and then I will come with my damn standard at a higher subdivision And actually, so there is a significant amount of volume between that pinky knuckle and where the fold is happening. But I think I might give myself a little bit more room there as well, make it a little bit longer on that axis as well. And with the dam standard, I'll just come in and so I've got a bit of a fold there, kind of one there, and then it's going to go up, and then we will begin our cut in. So I need to add a little bit of more volume in that little section. And this whole thing here could probably get just a little bit longer. I know I'm kind of going back and forth about making that longer and then making it shorter. That's just how this works. So the next thing I notice is I've got these nice points here of my knuckles, whereas on the reference it's actually, or the sculpt, it's actually not really, it's kind of rounded there. So I'm going to use dam standard and just kind of run along with the alt pushed so that I can get that to pull out. And kind of use the move brush here. So just blocking in those big forms, and we will continue this in the next video.